What is volunteering? Within the philosophy of Erasmus Plus Youth in Action, volunteering is very important as a way to learn and contribute to personal development, as well as to the society we live in. Volunteering is considered an altruistic activity and is intended to promote participation and solidarity and improve quality of life. In return, this activity can produce a feeling of self-worth and respect. There is no financial gain involved for the individual. Volunteering is also associated with skills development, socialization, and fun. Volunteering may have positive benefits for the volunteer, as well as for the person or community being served. It is also a way of making contacts for possible future employment. It is helping, assisting, or serving another person or persons without pay. European Voluntary Service allows a young person residing legally in one of the member or partner countries who is between 17 and 30 years old to become a volunteer in another country for a specified period of between 2 and 12 months. The voluntary activities can be in various fields, such as the environment, arts and culture, activities with children, young people or the elderly, heritage or sports and leisure. The project has to take place in a country other than where the volunteer lives. It should be non-profit making and unpaid. Each EVS project involves a partnership between a volunteer, a sending organisation, and the host organisation. One of the countries involved in the project must be an EU member state or an accession country. It is possible to do EVS in all 28 European Union member states and partner countries. It might also be possible to go outside of these countries, but this involves a different procedure which you would need to contact your national agency about. European Voluntary Service is based on the following main principles. 1. Promoting active citizenship. 2. Developing the ability to interact with people of different languages and cultures. 3. Spreading tolerance among young people of the European Union. 4. Supporting the development of local communities. 5. Increasing your own skills through the practical experience of volunteering abroad. 6. Encouraging the learning of another language.
Hello everybody, my name is Miguel Gonzales. I am 31 years old and I am from Barcelona, Spain. I have been living in Bucharest for the last 10 months. I came here to teach Spanish and English in a volunteer project. I had the chance to take part in the protest against the corruption law. This was a new law approved in February 2017 by the PSD, which decriminalized corruption offences if they don't overcome 44,000 euros, or in Romanian currency, 200,000 lei. The PSD justified the law by saying that the prisons are overcrowded and politicians are the less dangerous people and probably the first to be left out. Another reason for my coming to Romania was to learn and discover more about the communist era. Maybe the comparison is not very relevant. Evolution of the civil society? If yes, what do the Romanians say?
It's a very large difference between Rezist movement in February 2017 and the events in 1989.
The motivation is different, but the essence of the protest, I think, is the same.
In 1989, the need for change was more developed.
One main difference is that people that choose to protest in 1989, for example, they knew that they might be killed.
They were really afraid they could lose their life.
Ceausescu was gaining like he was a mythological creature.
We were expecting something.
If I have something to lose, I will go out and protest.
I think that this is a really relevant reason why people came in such large numbers to demonstrations. They feel a little bit ashamed that they didn't go to vote.
The protests in Piața Victoriei took a very interesting turn at one point. I mean, people got very creative.
Many of the people that currently are against these protests, they were in the street back in 1989 protesting against communist rule.
I would choose one word, and that is pride.
So I felt good as a Romanian. It was a a sense of restored pride. I'm Ioana Tudor, I am a Romanian, I'm 40 years old, and I work as a public servant in the Ministry of Education in Romania.
I am George, I'm 36 years old. I come from Brașov. I've been living here for the last 5 years. I am a journalist at base, so I've studied journalism and I've been doing for the last 16 years cultural journalism. I am also involved a little bit in sales and in a nutshell, this is who I am.
I had the chance to lead the protest against the corruption in Bucharest, the capital of Romania, and in another one of the most important cities, which is Sibiu. I remember a lot of creative banners, clothes, people making noise with drums, and a lot of Romanian flags, expressing the disagreement with the government's decisions. In Bucharest, the night I took part, we were, according to some sources, 200,000 people protesting. In Sibiu we were also marching through the streets with the banners, and I heard that it was the city with the biggest percentage of population participating in the protest. Do you think getting out in the streets to protest is normal for a society like Romania?
I believe it's normal. Maybe if you asked me like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have said, no, that's an extraordinary thing. I still believe that it is very special, that the fact that we went out in the streets. I think it was a good thing. And I believe that it gave a lot of Romanians hope within themselves. So they began to have a little faith in this generation, my generation, that has felt the communism years, but also they have developed. I had my adolescence in the transition period from 1989 to 2000, and so you could understand we are a generation that was very, let's say, very dizzy in a way that we were bombarded with different from when we were born and until now. We developed and evolved in two different societies, and we probably, most of us, still try to understand this new society and how we should behave best, and how we could create something that would make sure that our kids and the kids of our kids will not be involved with communism again.
Yes, I would say that currently this is a normal attitude that Romanian people, and especially youngsters, are inclined to do. So I do believe that this is something normal, and this is something healthy for a society like ours that is still striving to build some democratic institutions.
I decided to take part in the protest to sympathize with Romanians against this ordinance that I found very unfair. And also, I have to say that the atmosphere was exceptional and great, with a lot of people protesting in a polite and correct manner, singing and helping each other. I learned how to say tips in the Romanian language. Hoci! And the call of the Romanian night with all that snow and ice made the protest very impressive. It was a challenge for a Mediterranean person like me. Did you go to the protest of this February against the corruption law?
Yes, I was, and I felt very proud to be there. I was there, and I was there because I wanted to make my ideas known, but mostly because I wanted to endorse this great and big idea that you cannot mess with the Romanian people like you did in communism. You cannot fool us in the face. You cannot cheat, and you cannot continue to be corrupt and expect us to do nothing. So everything was connected, and everything was led up to this point where a lot of the members of my generation just thought they could not take it anymore. So yes, I was there, and I was there because I wanted to add my voice to the others.
Yes, of course. I wouldn't be here if I wouldn't have participated. And I really feel proud of my participation together with many of my friends in protest occurring this January, February in Bucharest, and not only in Bucharest, but I participated in the capital.
Why did you decide to go to the protest and join the people?
There are many reasons. First of all, I felt betrayed by the Romanian politicians that are trying to do whatever they can to fight back against anti-corruption laws and against democratization of my country. And we also had the luck to have before this current government which was independent, and they were an example that anti-corruption, transparency and good governance is possible in Romania. And actually we got used to this. And when former communists, they came to power again after election in December, they try to, let's say, to roll back what is happening good in Romania in terms of politics and in terms of democracy. And I felt the urge, the need to protest and to express my deepest resistance towards what is happening. It is not right for politicians to steal our right to live in a good and transparent society. So this is why I protested, and I went to protest in central Bucharest for about 2 weeks.
By this subject, I felt impressed and I identified myself with these values when I saw all these Romanian citizens protesting every day in the street, and that made me think about the protests that were happening in my country in the last years against the corruption and the crisis. Because corruption nowadays is a part of our daily life, even becoming something normal for us, affecting our public health system and to our public education. Whole Europe was putting attention to this protest. Why? From Spain, my family asked me, what is happening in Romania? What is the matter with all that people there? I felt proud of the Romanian society, which was an example to the rest of the world, as to Spain as well, where we also had very big protests in all our cities during the last years, involving a lot of fights with the police, with hundreds of thousands of voices asking for a solution against the crisis and corruption. How is corruption harming the Romanian society?
I think that there are many ways in which corruption is influencing the Romanian society in a bad way, meaning that they cannot have some lives that they can really control, in a society in which there are a lot of dirty businesses and a lot of public mismanagement of money and of corrupt people that are getting rich at the expense of normal Romanians. Usually people tend to be rather poor. They have no trust in the political system. They have no trust in democratic values, since they consider that democracy is only valuable for people in power to get richer and richer, and for them to stay poor. And I think this is a cycle of underdevelopment and mistrust that is being fueled by corruption. As far as I know, no corrupt society is a happy one and a developed one. We cannot have a healthy society without transparency and without people trusting the state institution, you know. And this is something that can be applicable in every country in the world. And I think that Romania has a problem with corruption at official level, which is keeping our country in a state of underdevelopment.
So do you think that maybe Romanian citizens were an example for other countries in the world?
I believe so. But, not to be very proud of being Romanian, I believe that if this kind of protests would happen in, North Korea, for example. In North Korea would be magic if that would happen. But let's say in Japan or whatever, in Andorra, a small country, I would say the same. I believe that everyone has something to learn from it, and that is the fact that standing up for what you believe is one thing that you can think that is good on a personal level or on a society level, and secondly, the power to coagulate large masses of people. That is something that is not easily done, because we've done this and we are saying we are not okay with you not being okay. That should send a message to let's say at least to one Europe that is divided now. And I'm looking very closely to what happens in France with these elections now, because it's important that the right nationalistic wing does not have a full victory, because we had a lot of bad mishaps in the politics. With Turkey, with Brexit, with Trump and so on.
What do you think could have stopped the corruption before the protest?
Yeah, people going to vote, probably. I do believe that people could have, if they were to participate in vote, this party wouldn't have been so powerful, in Romanian politics. And since they wouldn't have had a majority in parliament, this law could not have been possible, and this new government, to pass this law. And so I think that another result in elections could have stopped what happened, but it didn't.
One important thing is that if we changed politicians, their age, and if you get young people into politics, they will not have big debts to people with big money, so to speak. Probably not having debts would keep you concentrating on making this country great again, as Trump says. But, this is something that I believe would have changed. And also, people getting out to vote. That would have been amazing. If the statistics say that if everyone would have go on to vote, PSD would not be the majority in the parliament today. So it would have been one of the main reasons for us not to have big protests like that.
I cannot know how were the protests in the 89, when the people were fighting against communism, but I can imagine something similar but more violent, because a lot of blood was spilled that days. Nowadays in Romania, we still keep the legacy of the communist era, because of the communist members of the Communist Party were reconverted into PSD members. So maybe it made one think about the strong rage of the population against this new law, that could be even bigger knowing that you fight against some communist members.
Timișoara, Romania. In mid-December, during riots against the communist regime of Nicolae Ceausescu, security forces shot dead 73 men and women. The tyrant Ceausescu was ruthless in suppressing opposition. In Bucharest, on December the 21st, the Romanian government staged a pro-Ceausescu rally. These workers were sent here to cheer him.
Doresc de asemenea să adresez mulțumiri inițiatorilor organizatorilor acestei mari manifestări populare din București, considerând aceasta ca o...
The crowd began to jeer. State television took the pictures off the air. It was too late. There was fighting throughout the night. Next day, crowds stormed the Central Committee building and charged upstairs. Ceausescu and his wife escaped by helicopter. An aide held a gun to the pilot's head.
It was important to call on the whole population of Romania to get out on the streets so that they could paralyze the country. And that was what happened. It was important to say that Ceausescu had fled in his helicopter because people couldn't believe what was happening.
That same day, Ceausescu was captured. He and his wife had got just 45 miles from Bucharest. In the muddle and confusion that followed, different factions fought it out in the streets. Nearly 1,000 were killed. The Ceausescus were tried by court-martial.
Unanimitate de voturi pe inculpații Ceaușescu Nicolae și Ceaușescu Elena la pedeapsa capitală și confiscarea totală a averii pentru săvârșirea infracțiunilor de genocid prevăzut de act 357 alineatul 1 litera C cod penal. Nu e voie să le legați.
Sentence was carried out. Television faked the actual execution, but the corpses were real enough.
It reassured me to know Ceausescu was dead, even though we're humanists and I'm a poet. If he hadn't died, then we would have died. And that's the truth.
The executioners took care their victim could be recognized.
Do you think there are the same feelings and spirit of the protesters of the 1989 or of nowadays? What do you think are the differences?
You know, back in 1989, I was 12. I was still a child. I didn't participate in that demonstrations, but I do remember what my parents, my relatives were saying about protest. Many of them participated in protest in 1989. I would say that it was like in 1989 a mass protest. All kind of people participated, not only young people, but also old people that were fed up of communists. Of course, like in every protest, youngsters they are the most preoccupied by defending rights, freedom, liberty. But in 1989 also some old people participated, and it was a protest against the whole system, which was so harming for every Romanian and for everyday life. Whereas currently, I think that only a part of society participated. And actually these protests, they in kind of ways they also divided, actually yes, they divided the Romanian society between younger generation that wants reform, that wants transparency and more democracy, and wants to live in a really EU member state, and the older generation that are afraid of change. They want social benefits that the social democrats can enforce on the political life. And this is a big difference with events in 1989, which was, let's say, a general move of the Romanian society for change. In this year, protests only were supported by some components of the Romanian society, not by the entire society. So there are some differences. There is a need for change, but in 1989 the need for change was more developed at the level of the Romanian society, and it was more supported by the Romanian people. Now I think that in the situation won't change. There is a big divide in the Romanian society between people supporting communists and people that want to live in Europe. And this is not only happening in Romania, but also in other countries in Eastern Europe that are divided between the West and the East. The West, which is equivalent, at least in our views, it is equivalent with democracy, with having a good life, and with an independent spirit, whereas the East is more patriarchal and wants stability and not happiness, let's say. Now we define happiness in terms of autonomy of the individual, whereas older generation, they want stability. I think that many of the people that currently are against these protests, they were in the street back in 1989 protesting against communist rule. And nowadays they are supporting the parties that took over the legacy from the Communist Party. So it's kind of a joke what is happening. They protested in order to have food, in order to have fuel, to have food. This idea of liberty was related to the idea of people having something to eat.
Yeah, to have the basics.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, could we say that in the communist times you had nothing else to lose, and maybe now the difference is that you have the times were different, no?
Yeah, very different. One main difference is that people that choose to protest in 1989, for example, they knew that they might be killed. I mean, they were going and they were shouting out those things that they were shouting, Jos Ceausescu, and all that. They knew that they might be killed at any moment. Now we know that is not possible. I mean, that would be a national tragedy. So this is one important, let's say, aspect, one important difference. Other difference is that the way people coagulate to form a protest, it's much easier, and it uses internet, Facebook actually. They're using other tools. Then it was word of mouth and maybe television. Now we know instantly. So that's a very big difference. You're constantly connected to the others, and it's important. At that point, yes, you couldn't go any lower with the standard of living. Now you can lose. I mean, if you lose 100 leis from your paycheck, or because this government proposed and promised a lot of raised salaries and pensions and so on, but they don't have a plan. Where do you get those money? So those money will come out from me, and if I have something to lose, I will go out and protest. In that period, they were protesting for an idea, and of course for all the years and all the people that died in communist prisons and so on. The motivation is different, but the essence of the protest, I think, is the same.
A fost ora 23, buletin de știri, București. Începută la Timișoara printr-o demonstrație pașnică, reprimată brutal de către autorități prin forțele de securitate, Revoluția românilor s-a întins rapid în întreaga țară. Armata a trecut de partea populației. Pe străzile din Timișoara, Sibiu, Brașov, București și alte orașe, numărul tinerilor morți și răniți în lupta pentru libertate continuă să crească.
Doamne, vino, Doamne, să vezi ce-a mai rămas din oameni. Doamne, vino, Doamne, să vezi ce-a mai rămas din oameni.
Also, we would like to talk a little bit about the communist times and the big protest of 1989. We know that on February, that protest against the corruption were the biggest in the country since 1989. The people were protesting against the communists, the bad situation of the country. So, if the people weren't agree with the communist politics, why didn't they protest before?
There are many reasons, but actually before 1989, Romania was under communist rule and people were very much afraid. And whenever they did this, for example, we had some events in 1977, other events in 1987, when people protested against the communist rule, and these protests, they were thwarted, people were sent to prisons. So the repression was awful. People were under strict monitorization by the communist intelligence apparatus, so they had no freedom, they had no liberty. It was a very strict regime, and they were really afraid they could lose their life if protesting. So it's a very large difference between Rezist movement in February 2017 and the events in 1989.
We understand that maybe in other times this situation would not bring a big protest like nowadays.
And the main trigger for protest in February was the fight against corruption, which actually, in order for people to know about corruption, a society needs to be transparent and it needs to be a democracy. Whereas in communist times, people in Romania, they didn't know about government stuff. We only had like 2-hour TV programs in Romania, in which the dictator Nicolae Ceausescu and his henchmen, they were talking about the bright future that we had in communist times. We didn't know about what was happening in the government, in the communist government, and about politics. Of course, there was corruption in communist Romania, but people in Romania, they didn't know about this, and the way elections were held was pretty much crazy. People voted a list, there was only a party, the Communist Party, and people voted a list with members of the Communist Party. No other party were allowed to exist in Romania. So this kind of protest would have been out of place in a communist regime, since people didn't know about official corruption. Of course, communist rulers, they were all corrupt. But we didn't know about this. We didn't have TVs, we didn't have free press, several political parties, so pluralism. So this kind of protest can only exist in a democracy and in a pluralist system.
And do you think that other journalists who could be covering the protest felt free to express his or her opinion?
I'm following some freelancers, for example. So the freelancers and the ones who gathered under a roof, I would mention, for example, you can search online for the RISE project, RISE, RISE project, which is some journalists, but not only specialists from that were highly educated and studied abroad and so on, and they got together as a community and began making heavy research on political matters. And for example, they were really free to express what they wanted to express. Also, Casa Jurnalistului, which is in translation the house of the journalist. These are freelance journalists that come together and create, big inquiries and big documentaries. So, for talking about them, I'm sure that they were free. On the other hand, we had the classic media, the TV stations and so on, and I could say that I remember like 2 or 3 people that resigned from those televisions because they were not allowed to, as journalists, to say the truth about what happened there. So I believe most of the journalists that are publishing online or not in the classic media, they were free.
Journalists, the heroes that we root for in movies like All the President's Men, The Great Muppet Caper, and most recently, Spotlight.
We gotta nail these scumbags. We gotta show people that nobody can get away with this. Not a priest or a cardinal or a freaking pope.
So, because you are a journalist, do you think that if you had the chance to work in the communistic times, you would be also a journalist, or you would choose other?
Well, it is very interesting because I was thinking about this very recently. Would have I become a journalist if I was a mature young man in the communistic times? Probably yes. I mean, it is, but I don't know if I would have stayed too long because I cannot write good texts if I'm not inspired by something. And what inspires me is the truth. And if I knew that I was lying, maybe I was not that good as a journalist, and maybe I would have done this for a long time. But, thinking back, the idea of not having a free press. On the other hand, I'm doing cultural press. So, there were some journalists that were communicating secretly with other journals or press institutions in Europe. Probably, knowing myself, I would have tried to get out of the country and maybe go and do real journalism at this Free Europe radio that was really important. And then maybe I would have done a political press or so. But in Romania, you had to understand that if you were to do this, bad things will happen to you, and it happened to a lot of people that try to send information what happens in Romania abroad.
Did you live this protest more like a journalist or than a citizen?
Well, I believe I did it in both ways. As a journalist, because I'm usually speaking about cultural matters. It is not really my expertise to talk about social movements and political. But of course, as a journalist, you cannot help but be informed and try to understand what's going on around you. So, but in this case, I was there as a citizen, most importantly, as a Romanian who wanted to state that enough is enough. So I try not to be, let's say, a journalist there, but a Romanian who is very pissed at what's happening.
And could you choose one word or some words to describe that protest, that days of protest?
I would choose one word, and that is pride.
Why?
Because seeing a people, let's say a country that was under communism for 60 years, and they did not have a chance to speak their mind. And after that, they came the revolution, and we say, okay, now we can express everything we think it's important. But during the years, we began to feel poor. We began to feel that no one cares about, okay, it's free speech, but who's listening to me? Because you begin protesting and no one is listening. So then you just become, I don't know, maybe pessimistic, or you just say, yeah, truth, who needs it, And then you see generations changing and you understand the fact that there is still a chance. We have people that are not touched too much by the communist thinking, the fear of expressing yourself. So maybe this was the first time or one of the first times that we felt that we still have a voice. We didn't lose our voice. We can, even if we understood that probably we should have gone to vote in large amounts, but if we didn't do that, at least in the 12th hour, maybe we could change something. And we changed the fact that law did not go through. But, a lot of dangers are lurking. So we have to keep an open mind. And also, the civil society is becoming stronger and stronger. And this is why I believe pride is the word.
So I am sure that maybe if you are listening to us in your home, you can feel also, in the comparison, you can have the same feeling, because maybe in your country is the same situation and you feel the same need to go to protest than in Romania and Romanian people. Okay, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you here and hope to see you in other time.
Thank you very much, Luis. You are very nice.
Yes, I know. I have to say something for the audience. I prefer to, because it was to Spain. Mierda, to Spain. I think I need to read it one more time. 89s. Were converted. I want to repeat. Revolution of the civil society. Okay, thank you very much.